Hello, everybody.
You are tuned into Nong Wealth. Today we've got a special guest. As we did mention that this week we have an exciting event whereby we'll be meeting property investors and we'll be having experts all in the same place.
I'm really excited about the lady that's actually going to be talking right now. So now her name is Miss Patega, and she's actually going to be telling us more about conveyancer.
Good morning, guys, and thank you for inviting me.
I mean, when it comes to conveyance, when we speak about conveyance, it seems like it's a complicated word. However, if you can just simplify it, how does it affect a property investor? And when we're referring to a conveyancer, who are we speaking about?
Okay, just before Sis Patega answers that, right? I know that when we're sitting in a circle, right, and I want to sound smart, I'm like, I need to talk to my conveyancer, and then people are just lost. What's a conveyancer?
Yes, if I can explain who the conveyancer is, a conveyancer is an admitted attorney who has written the exams or passed the exams and admitted as a conveyancer at the High Court. So he's a qualified attorney, and he's admitted as a conveyancer at the High Court.
So now, just as a follow-up question, is a conveyancer strictly for property, or is a conveyancer a general term within the law industry?
The conveyancer is the attorney that is qualified to do all the conveyancing transactions.
When you're buying a property, Mrs. Patega, what normally happens is that your estate agent will be the one that will actually recommend everybody. So they'll recommend a bond originator. They'll also recommend a conveyancer. So now my thing is, do I have an option of saying that can I use my conveyancer?
You do, yes, you do have an option, but I would say, do you have an option as a seller or do you have an option as a purchaser? So our common law specifically states that the seller is the party that is entitled to appoint a conveyancer in a property transaction. So reason being, the seller is the party that is far more at risk than the purchaser. So the seller again feels comfortable when he appoints his own conveyancer because he feels that the appointed conveyancer is the attorney that has his interest at heart. But then again, I just want to also highlight that because it has become a standard practice in real estate that the seller appoints a conveyancing attorney in a property transaction, it doesn't mean that the purchaser cannot negotiate. Because as a purchaser, you can negotiate before you sign the sale agreement. You can negotiate with the seller to appoint your own conveyancer. Because I know in most cases, property investors, they would always want to work or to use someone who is within the power team. So within your power team, you've got your conveyancer. So they always want to utilize the services of that conveyancer. So you can negotiate with the seller then to appoint your own conveyancer because I know the argument is always, I am the purchaser, I'm paying the attorney's costs. So why do the seller has to appoint? It is only because it has been a standard practice that the seller has to appoint a conveyancer due to the risk that the seller has, because the risk has more, the seller has more risk than the purchaser. Now, if we have to talk about an estate agent recommending a conveyancer, remember the estate agents, they are dealing with a lot of conveyancers or a lot of attorneys, so they know which attorney which attorney is efficient. They know which attorney is going to expedite the transfer, and they know which attorney has got a good track record. So when they recommend, they are not merely saying you are forced to use that conveyancer. When they recommend, they are merely saying, I know this attorney has got a good track record, this attorney is reputable, this attorney is efficient. So they always obviously know that their own interest is to make sure that the transaction runs smoothly. So when they recommend, it's obviously up to you as the seller to go with that recommendation, or if you have your own conveyancer, then you can appoint your own.
I like how you spoke about recommendation, and I would recommend your service. I want to ask something. Like, we were in a situation whereby a transaction took close to a year.
It did take a year.
It did take a year. So now our challenge was, where is the problem? Is it with the seller or it might be with the conveyancer? So now how, as a property buyer, how do I track this? And even when I want to take it forward, what options do I have as a property investor or even just a property buyer?
Yes, you know, when it comes to delays on property transactions, there are many factors that can result in a delay. So I think what is important to remember is that every property transaction is unique. So you need to understand the facts of that transaction first before you can say why there are delays, why the conveyancer is delaying, or why the seller is delaying. So you need to understand the facts of that transaction because each transaction is unique. And the first thing I would like to highlight as well is that in a property transaction, there are three attorneys that are involved. That is obviously in most cases. That is the attorney that is appointed by the seller, who is a transferring attorney, the attorney that is appointed by the bank to register the new bond on behalf of the purchaser, the attorney that is appointed by the bank to cancel the existing bond on behalf of the seller. So all these attorneys, they have to work together to have the transaction finalized or to expedite the transaction. It depends on the cooperation of these three parties. So now coming to why the transaction delays. So the transaction, sometimes it delays, one, because you must remember, if you as the purchaser are applying for a bond, we are not able to proceed with the transaction until the bond is granted. Because remember, the OTP that you signed is an OTP with a suspensive condition. So meaning it's suspended until the bond is granted. As soon as the bond is granted, that's when we can start the process. So meaning if you are given a period where on the OTP it says you must obtain a bond within 15 days, then it means that the conveyancer will merely acknowledge receipt of that instruction and only start the process when that bond is granted. Because remember, the purpose of the suspensive condition is to let you as the purchaser off the hook should the bond not be granted. So meaning it lapses automatically. That is why we cannot start the process. So now coming to what else then can delay, it's the municipality. I've come across transactions where the municipality has been estimating your meter, your water readings, has been estimating your electricity readings, and they don't have the actual information on their system. So meaning now we have to get someone to get to your meter to take photos for your meter so that the municipality can link your meter. And then when the meter is linked, we still have to wait, for example, for the billing to run through for that month before we can even obtain the clearance figures. I'm just mentioning one of the few, and sometimes the municipality doesn't have the full information on their system, which makes it difficult for them to issue the clearance figures. And the other thing that I would mention maybe that can delay the transaction is when, for example, you are purchasing a property where there's a deceased estate. So if there's a deceased estate, we must always know that there is a master of the High Court that is involved in that transaction, which means the master of the High Court has to consent to the sale of that transaction. That again can delay the transfer.
I think with us that was the problem, because now the property that we actually bought was a deceased estate, and then mixed with that we also had the pandemic that had actually started, so everything was just like bad. We were thinking that it was our transfer attorneys that were actually taking
constant.
Yes. But now I understand right now where they're actually coming from. So you talked about the three lawyers, of which the first one is the transfer attorneys. The second one, you said it was the bond registration, and you also spoke about the bond cancellation, right? So now as a property investor, it does happen sometimes, in fact most of the time, whereby I'm not going to be holding the property for 20 years. I'm actually looking at holding the property for, say for instance, 5 to 10 years, looking at appreciation, looking at my cash flow, also looking at if I'm going to be selling my property to actually get a better property that will have a better ROI. So now, can you please just take us through the bond cancellation? Is there a certain percentage that they actually use to actually cancel off the bond?
Yes, when we talk about the bond cancellation process, obviously the bond is cancelled due to you selling your property, or the bond is cancelled because you have paid up your home loan. So on the cancellation, I'm going to talk about you now selling the property. So when you are selling your property, one thing that I would always remind the property owners is to inform the bank. You need to send a notice to the bank, to give the bank a 90-day written notice, informing them of your intention to sell your property. Remember, the 90-day written notice that you send to the bank, it doesn't merely say that you are already selling the property. You are only giving an intention to settle your home loan through that property sale. So meaning it won't have any effect on you, for example, not having to sell the property. It's merely saying to the bank, please note, I am in the process of selling my property. My property is on the market. The reason behind the 90-day period is because there is a penalty fee that the bank usually calculates that is added on your bond cancellation. So with that, again, it's going back to your previous question about the delays. Sometimes you get a client where he says, you know what, Patega, this penalty fee is very high. So for me to pay this high amount, I would rather wait for the 90-day period to lapse before I can transfer so that I can escape paying that high amount. So it's important then, as soon as you put your property on the market, notify the bank so that at least that 90-day period, it can be calculated, because it's still gonna reflect on the cancellation figures, but at least you know that when the property is registered, there is no penalty fee to pay anymore. Because remember, at the end of the transaction, the bank will do their own reconciliation and refund whatever monies that are due to you. Now, coming to your question, on the process of the cancellation, one, the bank will be notified by the conveyancing attorney that bank, please note, this property has now been sold. And then what will the bank do? One, they will appoint their own attorney. That is now the cancellation attorney. That attorney then will get in touch with you as the seller to inform you that they have received the instruction from the bank that your property is now sold. And then they will give the transferring attorneys the figures that the bank have calculated to have that bond cancelled. So again, what you need to remember is that there is a fee that attorney will charge you as the seller. So that fee usually ranges between, I've never seen one that is more than 5,000. So there's one, some there are 5, some there are 6. It depends again, because it might be less than that, it might be higher than that. Reason being, maybe you have 2 bonds that are registered in the property, or you've got 1, or you've got 3. So that fee varies. And then again, that fee varies from attorney to attorney. So I wouldn't say, for example, that it's a set fee of 2.5. So then that cancellation attorney is appointed and communicated with you as well as the transferring attorney. Then their account will need to be paid, and then they will liaise in terms of how the guarantees should be issued with the transferring attorney. And then what is important again is that you need to know, because you have sold the property doesn't mean you are going to stop paying towards your bond. So meaning the bond repayments will still continue, even if we know that the bank has already done the calculation. So you will still pay. Remember, there's a form that you will need to sign, which you will give the bank your banking details, whereby the bank, when they do their final recon after the property is registered, then they will refund through that bank account that you will provide to them whatever monies that are due to you. And then the last thing I would mention is that, again, there is a home loan. There is usually a life policy, or there is an insurance that is attached to your home loan. So those things are the things that you need to be aware of in terms of informing the bank whether you are cancelling the life policy, depending on which life policy you took. And then again, when it comes to insurance, to inform the bank that you would want the insurance to be cancelled.
No, Ms. Patega, it's quite clear, and it's also clear to our audience. You know, we're always speaking about having a power team, especially now, because when it's coming to property investing, I can't do everything alone. I always tell our clients that you're going to pay school fees whether you like it or not. So the question will be, what do you mean I'm going to pay school fees? I'd rather sit with the power team and pay the power team in advance, other than being in a situation that I didn't anticipate. Only then, now that being the school fees. So it's very important to actually align yourself with the power team so that you know all of this before you find yourself in trouble.
Sure. So now, as a last question, right? So now, Sis Patega just started her own company. Sis Patega, can you please just take us through that, and how can people get in touch with you?
Yeah.
Oh wow. Oh wow. Thank you so much. Yes, I have started my own convincing, I wouldn't say convincing, I've started my own law firm. I know that we're specializing in conveyancing. I have been working in the conveyancing or in the real estate industry for over 10 years already. And I've been a conveyancing secretary. I was admitted as an attorney, admitted as a conveyancer, admitted as a notary as well. So the firm, the firm, or me as a director of the firm, I've got that experience. That's what I'm saying. I wouldn't say it's young because I'm not young in the industry. So I've been in this industry for a long, more than 10 years, if I can put it that way. So if you want to get in touch with me, yes, my cell phone number is 082-858-4165, and my email address is patega@ppminc.co.za.
So thank you so much, Ms. Patega. This weekend, for the record, this weekend we are hosting an event. There's so much more that we will be discussing about this. So if you didn't RSVP in time, unfortunately, this is all we have for you. But those that did RSVP in time, it's going to be fun, guys. Trust me.
And from my side, I mean, we have heard a lot about conveyancer, but now we're still going to get more value on Saturday. I'm really looking forward to that, and let's have fun, man. So, Patega, do you have any last words that you want to say to the viewers?
The last word I would say to the viewers is I deal with a lot of property investors. I always advise property investors that it is important to do your own due diligence. So do your own due diligence, make sure that you understand the transaction you're about to conclude, so that if, for example, there is, as we are talking about a power team, you should have an attorney in your power team whereby all your OTPs are being read together with your attorney for your own understanding, so that you can at least know that when you're concluding a transaction, you are not having any doubts.
So with regards to the power team, you already have Sis Patega as your attorney. Thank you, Ms. Patega, for your time, and thank you for watching. If you have actually watched this far, please do actually subscribe. If you haven't subscribed, please do subscribe, and thank you.
Looking forward to seeing you on the weekend or tomorrow. Nong Wealth signing out.
Cheers.